Hello everyone, and it is time at last to continue with part 2 of my Dragonlance Shadows of the Dragon Queen campaign diary, covering chapter 4 of the adventure. If you're starting here and want to know my thoughts on using Shadows of the Dragon Queen as a jumping off point for running Dragonlance and Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in general, I recommend you watch the first part, where I cover the opening chapters of the campaign, including chapter 3, which started the adventure. This time I'm covering chapter 4, which is where we ran into transitioning into the 2024 version of the D&D rules, along with our first proper dungeon. This campaign has been run about once a session per month, so we took us about 6 3 to 4 hour sessions to play through. So this is still a pretty meaty chapter of the game. Our party is made of Dristan Silverheart, an Aasimar paladin with the Knight of Solamnia background, Isolt de Lorimar, a warlock with the noble background, and the fiancée of Dristan, played by Dristan's player's partner, both of whom have oaths to each other, which works for me and for them. We have Fletch Stinendal, a Qualinesti ranger with the folk hero background, and because he badly injured a monster that some people thought was a dragon, thanks to a well-named shot and them not getting a look at the monster, but because he knows it wasn't a dragon he's got a bit of imposter syndrome. We have Sabelina, a cleric of Gillian, god of knowledge, who, because of her god's portfolio, was able to be raised in a community that didn't get that hostile when the cataclysm happened. The party also has 2 sidekick characters, Hrig Roundrook, a dwarven semi-cleric, and Tem Tremble, a Kender druid. I'm running the game using Foundry VTT as our players are geographically spread out, which comes with its own challenges, which I will be discussing over the course of this series. When we last left off, our players had finished fighting withdrawal from the town of Vogler, a small fishing village that they'd come to for a funeral, and found themselves facing the predations of the Red Dragon army. This leads the party and the refugees to float downriver to the city of Kalaman, which is protected by the Solamnic Knights, and our first session of this chapter opened with the party going to get assistance from the town for the refugees. This let me set up Lord Bakaris of Vogler as a semi-antagonist. He's not an active opponent, he doesn't hold them any ill will, but as an upper-class twit, he's got a knack for getting in the way, which, as written, plays off well later in the chapter. This also has a few character beats here with, for example, Tristan getting his armor detacticooled at the smith's shop, and Isolt had the next stage of her induction into the Orders of High Sorcery with Wayhan, a local black-robed mage. Between Isolt not opening the letter that she was sent to deliver, and the fact that her pact was based on the power of love, Wyatt decided Isolt the perfect Pollyanna schmuck for the white robes. From there, the party was brought in to work with the Solamnics, with their first assignment being to reach out to local gnomish inventor Tatiana Rukeldusk to ask about the boiler track that they fought back in Vogler. After rescuing her from some goblins, we learned that, yes, she knew about it, she'd built it, and she'd built it as an elaborate weed burner, and that she had a new invention, the Fargab, which might be of some use to the party in the future. I basically described it as being like a World War II field radio, except, magic. After some discussion, Tatiana moved her workshop into town for protection. From here, the chapter opens up. The structure becomes something more of a hub-and-spoke situation. The book gives several missions that the player can go on, basically in almost any order, with the DM able to choose whether to hand them out linearly, or to do what I did and put them out in a list, while leaving a few for the players to run into on the way. During this, Isolt also got her familiar, a Sphinx of Wonder. Being that it's a cat, I house ruled it on any action. If the cat rolled a natural 1 on that check, Isolt's player could decide what cat-like thing the familiar is doing, rather than what she's supposed to be doing in combat or what have you. Partway through these missions, the party was reunited with Becklin and Cudgel's company, who rejoined the players on their way back to town and came with them to Kalaman, helping to bolster the garrison, and in turn lending Cudgel and Becklin's expertise to the defense of the town. This also leads to the start of the game's climax. With the increased troop strength in town, a mission is planned to infiltrate and help retake the outpost of Wheelwatch, a stopover point for couriers to swap out tired horses for fresh ones, which is actually rather important because the keep has been taken by the Red Dragon army. Now, in one of the earlier missions, the party had managed to capture a number of Red Dragon Army uniforms and was able to use them to infiltrate the outpost. The whole session played off a lot like a sort of World War II team on a mission film, like The Dirty Dozen, Guns of Navarone, or Kelly's Heroes. As with all good works in that genre, things went smoothly until the players actually got into the fort, and at that point something happened to cause the players to get tripped up. Or characters, rather. In this case, Tristan deciding to lead the horses to the stables, causing him to be sniffed out as being not quite right by the Dragonel, leading to a series of fights happening all over the keep, with the players split up and trying to keep everything under control. Some good roleplay from the players and some bad perception rolls from the guards helped keep them spread out and fooled for just long enough to assault to trick the guards into opening the gate, allowing the party's reinforcements waiting outside to sweep in and take the fortress. The big climax of the chapter started when the party returned from Wheelwatch Keep and learned that, in their absence, a force had been set out under Lord Baccharis' command to attack a Red Dragon Army patrol. The party rides out after this to learn that, in fact, this patrol was a feint, and the Salamnic troops were ambushed and are now in retreat. This, I think, is probably where the campaign juggling being a supplement for the game being a Dragonlance campaign setting an adventure, along with also trying to incorporate the Dragonlance wargame, causes problems. Now, all the previous fights that were written as being playable both as a regular encounter and a wargame scenario worked fairly well at being both, putting the players as player characters as being a small part of a larger battle, or just having it just be a smaller battle where it makes sense for it to be them being their smaller part. Here, I think the scope of the larger fight is needed to show how big the situation is and how things have changed, not just in the sense of this particular battle, but also the player's place, or player character's place, within the larger conflict. The party managed to link up with the survivors, and with Darrett managed to organize a more structured retreat instead of a rout. Lord Baccharis was is alive, but his son, however, is missing in action, and the Lord himself is distraught. The party returns to Calaman with the remains of the force, and learns that a small group of Salamnic knights has arrived in their absence, and also in the absence of the marshal, and their leader of this trio is in conference with the governor. Marshal is out on a different mission. They learned that the escort of the knights were, in fact, undead, and are waiting for the players and in order to keep them from interrupting their commander. After getting past them, they meet their commander, ostensibly their commander, a man calling himself Caradoc, the seneschal of Lord Soth. And also waiting for the players are the murdered bodies of the governor and the town council. Also, it seems that, Lord Soth himself was with them. We actually had a bit of a session cliffhanger here, with, after some dialogue and general banter from Caradoc, Tristan went for a cheap shot on Caradoc, which, as he'd been playing for about 4 hours at this point, made for a good spot for a JoJo cliffhanger. The final session went straight into that Caradoc fight, and then into the exploration of the catacombs below the castle, learning what Lord Soth was after, and in particular his search for the City of Lost Names. This also led to a few hiccups for exploration in Foundry. The first one is learning the ropes with the players issue. Specifically, the party kind of wandering all over the dungeon on separate actions whenever, which makes things difficult to keep track of who is where, while I'm also checking information on the dungeon map. That's something that probably get dealt with by either using a group token or using combat time in the dungeon itself. Additionally, probably isn't helping either, is I'm kind of in a single monitor setup, and what I should have done is either done a dual pane setup on the screen, or had the rules, the module text on a tablet or something in front of me. Yes, I do have a second monitor with a television, but that's off to the side, and the camera is here, and I want to be looking at the players. So being able to have that sort of setup works better having it this way. Part of it also, it's just a weird case, I feel like needing to have, I need three, I'm kind of in a weird situation where having 3 monitors would make things easier, but I don't have the space for 3 monitors. Even if I rearranged my like my computer off on one side and put a vertical monitor, still wouldn't quite work the way I want in terms of like having the things oriented the way that would work well for the game. And not to mention, I'm recording the sessions for the players themselves in my own reference. They're not going up on this YouTube channel. But have it being able to record that means also I want to keep the monitor for the call, or the window for the call, in full screen. It's kind of messy in a few respects there. The other problem is a bit of a lighting issue. The dungeon maps in the actual adventure are designed around the characters walking into the room, and the player being able to reveal the map for that room on the table, whether it's covering it on the battle mat or showing some dwarven forge or similar terrain that the GM had set up. I mean, lots of right angles, which would otherwise have sharp corners that would prevent characters from seeing what's in those areas of the room behind those corners very clearly. The problem is Foundry kind of focuses on a natural lighting and line of sight model for exploring dungeons, which means sometimes it's not intuitive that where the doors are, particularly considering a major feature of this dungeon, this Lord Soth is blasted through the rock to reach their goal, done a full dungeon bypass. It makes things counterintuitive, like, oh, this is a crypt with lots of right angles, where there are the sconces where the bodies are laid to rest, and from a player standpoint, like, the door is hidden behind those sconces. So to put it another way, if I was doing this as a dungeon map on a table with players around it with miniatures and using a drawn dungeon map, or with, say, Dwarven Forge tiles, I could just lift up the paper or whatever else is covering it, and they'd see the whole room, because I don't need to have them have hidden line of sight for something around those corners. On the whereas with Foundry, they don't see there's the corner over there and there's anything necessarily behind there, unless they move their character all the way through the room to behind that corner, which causes the problem of, if somebody's player goes, I'm going to go off this way and that way and the other thing, it makes the herding cat problem of dungeon mastery, brings it to sharp relief. Other than that, as far as like the transition to 2024 goes, that's generally been okay. There's been a little bit of possible spell weirdness, but things have generally been lining up fine. And often the spell weirdness is less related to, I'd put it as player, as like difficulty with the transition, and it's more around still some lingering growing pains with Foundry in terms of, this character had a spell with the 2014 version of 5th edition on their sheet, hadn't really used it much, but have forgotten to add it on in Foundry, purely due to not due to shenanigans on their end, but more failure to utilize the system, and hadn't really conveyed that along to me in terms of requesting for help. So that's something that needs to be worked on. But that'll be for the future. Next session, we are, doing our first, getting into the sort of hex crawl overworld map exploration version of the campaign, which means I'm definitely going to need to figure out how to do a group tile. And I'm going to see if I can figure out how to transition between group tile and individual character tiles once we get into the new map as well, because there's a few dungeons to explore there. Next chapter, we have the journey to find the City of Lost Names, see if they can get there before Lord Soth does, and also to attempt to re-sanctify the Dragonlance that they found in the crypts beneath the fortress.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Toss me a few bucks also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.